I have been studying zoo animal behaviour and welfare at Dundee and Angus College. Part of this course involved going to Camperdown every Wednesday. We were given a species to study the behaviour of, and then we have to make an enrichment that would encourage them to display their natural behaviours. My species was the Asian small-clawed otters. The 5 freedoms. Not only in Camperdown but for zoos all across the world, welfare for the animals must be up to standard. A basic foundation to follow by is the 5 freedoms from the Bramble Report. The Bramble Report was released in 1965 and outlined 5 freedoms that are required to meet the physical and mental needs of an animal, and is now used globally as a basic requirement for anyone when it comes to owning one. The 5 freedoms are freedom from hunger and thirst by having access to fresh water and a diet that maintains health and vigour, freedom from discomfort by providing the appropriate environment which includes shelter and a comfortable resting area, freedom from pain, injury or disease by prevention or rapid diagnosis and treatment, freedom to express normal behaviour by providing enough space, proper facilities and company of the animal's own kind, and freedom from fear and distress by providing conditions and treatment that avoid any mental suffering. Licensing. Every zoo in the UK requires a licence. It's required for anyone that is displaying wild animals to the public for at least 7 days a year, in any place that's not a circus or pet shop. To get your licence, your zoo must help educate people, be sustainable for the types of animals that you're keeping, and have a high standard of animal care. There are also a number of acts required for when it comes to owning a zoo. The Zoo Licensing Act. The Zoo Licensing Act was released in 1981 and is required in all zoos and aquariums in Britain. It means the inspection and licence is required in all zoos in the UK, and the aim of the Act is to make sure that animals are kept in enclosures and they are given a suitable environment where they have the opportunity to express most normal behaviours. It also covers transportation. This means anyone who takes an animal on a journey, whatever the length, should make sure that the journey is properly planned and the animals are checked regularly, the animals are fit to travel, those handling the animals are trained, and water, feed and rest are given to the animals as needed. Another act in place for zoos that keep wild animals is the Dangerous Wild Animals Act, released in 1976. The Act ensures that individuals who keep wild animals do so in a way that minimises any risk to the public. It provides that no person may keep any dangerous wild animal except under the authority of a licence, which is granted by the local authority after a veterinary surgeon inspects the area. The local authority that holds the licence may enter the premises where the animal is being kept at all reasonable times to check that everything is up to standard. There is also currently policies on zoo welfare practice in the forms of organisations such as BIAZA, the British Association of Zoos and Aquaria. BIAZA is a professional governing body made to represent all zoos and aquariums in the UK and Ireland. Their aim is to provide ideal animal welfare, educate the public, as well as be at the forefront of conservation and research in the UK, and there are currently over 100 members. EAZA, the European Association of Zoos and Aquaria. Similar to BIAZA, EAZA is a professional governing body for many zoos and aquaria in Europe and the Middle East. Their aim is to achieve and maintain the highest standards of care and breeding for the species that the members keep and to educate the public. They also provide funding to conservation projects, maintain populations of animals in human care to ensure their survival over the long term, and research animal biology to improve their understanding of animals. There are currently over 340 members. WAZA, the World Association of Zoos and Aquaria. WAZA ties them in all together. This organisation aims to unite zoos and aquaria around the world. Unlike BIAZA and EAZA though, it doesn't have a governing role. It's the global alliance of zoos and aquariums, dedicated to the care and conservation of animals and their habitats around the world. Their goal is to maximise their conservation impact, and there are currently over 400 members worldwide. These associations are there and they're representatives for good animal welfare. It's important that zoos constantly keep these welfare standards up. Good examples of welfare shown in zoos include well-maintained enclosures so they're well sized, there's heating provided if needed, they have the correct husbandry and there's enough enrichment, animals show good health and body condition, they show their natural behaviours, knowledgeable staff, the appropriate diets are given, and natural family groups or a good social structure is shown. Indications of poor animal welfare include poor maintained enclosures, for example they're too small, there's no heating provided, there's incorrect husbandry or not enough or no enrichment. Poor health or body conditions are shown, worrying or unnatural behaviours are shown, not enough keepers or uneducated staff, over or undercrowding, high amounts of injury or high amounts of death rate in animals, and toxic things in their environment. It's also important that zookeepers help keep these welfare standards up, as their role in a zoo is so important. The roles of a zookeeper are preparing food and feeding animals, cleaning out enclosures and changing bedding, checking for signs of distress or disease and caring for sick animals, checking for signs of wear or damage in their enclosure, monitoring conditions such as temperature or humidity, and keeping up with daily health records on zoos. Otters. The otters kept at Camperdown are Asian small-clawed otters. Their names are Flo, Pebbles and Brian. Asian small-clawed otters are the smallest of the otter family, and they're native to South and Southeast Asia, and they usually live by rivers and creeks. Otters are omnivores, which means they can feed on both meat and plant material. In the wild, they would mainly eat meat such as fish, crayfish, crabs, frogs, and even small rodents. However, they can also consume plant material such as seaweed, roots, aquatic bulbs, and blueberries if they're available on land. In captivity, otters' diet formulations need to consider the animal's preferences, body weight, physical condition, food availability, and a lot more. Once this has been sorted, they can get a variety of foods. In most institutions, fish or meat-based diets have been given, as it's what they would eat in the wild, and it also helps with growth and maintenance. They can get a variety of fish such as mackerel, herring, trout, cichlids, or crayfish. They could also get meat including chicken, horse, or venison, as well as invertebrates such as mealworms, crickets, and earthworms. You can also get a variety of vegetables such as carrots, lettuce, cucumber, celery, apple, blueberries, as well as dry kibble and occasionally boiled eggs. The otters at Camperdown will be fed 4 times a day, at 8:30, 11, 2 and just before the zoo closes. Fish will be cut into small pieces, a suitable size for the otters to feed on, and once ready it can be put into the enclosure. Usually it is be placed on the ground, as that is easy for the otters to find. However, hiding food around the enclosure will encourage the otters to forage around and look for the food, as that's what they do in the wild. Food can be fed at different times during the day rather than having set times every day. This is because in the wild, otters will never have a set feeding time every day. They will just eat when they find food. This replicates what happens in the wild and also prevents pre-feeding anticipation, which is when an animal expects their food at a set time and will wait out, cry, or show uncharacteristic behaviours until they get their food. Uncharacteristic behaviours are unnatural behaviours that an animal would show which it wouldn't usually in the wild. For example, in carnivores, pacing is a common uncharacteristic behaviour. This is because it could be bored. Carnivores in the wild would spend the majority of their time hunting over large distances. If food is just being chucked into a cage with no stimulation, it removes this normal activity. The animal has a natural drive to roam and hunt, therefore pacing back and forth can become a problem. In herbivores, destruction of their environment or themselves can be a problem. Again, this can be because they're bored or understimulated. For example, birds will overpluck their feathers when they're bored. Another problem that can occur is pre-feeding anticipation. This can be in a number of different behaviours, such as vocalization, pacing, or hanging about in the same place that they usually get fed. This will happen when food is chucked into their enclosure with no stimulation and at the same time every day. This characteristic was shown in the otters at Camperdown. Hand-reared animals. For younger animals that are hand-reared, it can be difficult to introduce them to a new group of animals, especially if the young is dependent on the person who has hand-reared it. This is an uncharacteristic behaviour that is developed because it's not had the chance to learn natural behaviours off of its own mum. This can make it harder for the animal to be accepted into the group if its routine or behaviours are different to how the rest of the groups work. Captive wild animals. Uncharacteristic behaviours can occur in captive wild animals if they're understimulated. For example, pacing, tongue rolling, destruction of their own environment or themselves can become a problem if an enclosure isn't up to standard or if there's nothing for the animal to do. This can lead into the behaviour because they're bored or they're stressed. Preventing these uncharacteristic behaviours. It's important that zoos try to replicate an enclosure or activities that are similar to what the animal would do in the wild. This will allow them to display their natural behaviours and prevent the uncharacteristic ones. This can be through having an enclosure that is set up in a way that replicates their natural environment or providing them with enrichment that stimulates them. Checking the welfare of animals. Making up welfare sheets as well as ethograms can be used to monitor the behaviour and welfare of animals. Welfare sheets are used to document the state of the area that they are living in. Any good points can be noted down, and any problems that you may have can be noted, changed, and checked on the next time you make a welfare sheet. It's important to keep up with these regularly to see how they're improving. When making up welfare sheets for the otters, in their enclosure, we notice that there's loads of room for them to roam about, sleep, play, and swim. Their enclosure is nice and clean, and as well as that, there's nothing that will cause any injury or accidents. However, there wasn't much enrichment in there, but we were later told that one of the otters, Brian, has eye problems, and putting enrichment in causes a problem of him bumping into things, so he took this into consideration when making our enrichment. As well as welfare sheets, we also created ethograms. Ethograms monitor the behaviour of animals over a certain period of time. In our case, it was the behaviour of the otters over a 45-minute period. From our results before the enrichment was put in, we noticed that the otters were extremely vocal around their feeding time and there wasn't much interaction with water. We also took these points into consideration when coming up with an enrichment idea. My group and I came up with the idea of a wooden box that would be placed in the otter's enclosure. It would have 4 holes on 2 sides, and in each hole we would either put hay, acorns or pebbles. We could then hide food inside each hole, meaning that the otters would have to forage around to find a piece of food, which is a behaviour that they display in the wild whilst they would try to hunt. We originally planned to put this enrichment in water, but later changed that idea as we found out later on that the Asian small-clawed otter spend the least amount of time in water out of the whole otter family. We wanted to create an enrichment that would encourage them to display more of their natural behaviours and less of the uncharacteristic ones. Due to the pre-feeding anticipation, they were always extremely vocal around their feeding time and would regularly hang out around their feeding corner until they got fed. Our hypothesis was, once the enrichment was put in, their vocalisation would decrease and their interaction with water and their movement would increase. We teamed up with the joiners at the Arbroath College to help us make our enrichment. We went there every Monday morning for a total of 4 weeks whilst they helped us bring our enrichment to life. evaluation, the results show that the hypothesis was correct, as once the Otters' enrichment was put in, there was a complete decrease in their vocalisation, which was at 80% before and went to 0% after. There was also an increase in their interaction with water, as that went from 14% to 27%, as well as their movement, which went from 63% to 93.5%. These were the exact results that we were wanting, and I'm so pleased with how everything turned out. Thank you for watching my documentary, and I hope you enjoyed.